And days after the executive committee of the Association of Malayalam Movie Artists stepped down following the release of the Justice K Hema Committee report, the actors' body is preparing to elect its new governing body in 2 months, with the hope that this will be a vastly different AMA from the all-powerful body. And our grim stalwarts from the industry have decided to not contest Mollywood Artists Association's election. Sources suggest superstars Mohanlal, a three-time AMA president, and Mammootty have taken the situation personally and have distanced themselves from the Artists Association body. The report revealed rampant sexual misconduct in the Malayalam film industry, with fingers pointing at senior AMA members who then even had to resign. As a result, the executive committee, including President Mohanlal, resigned from their posts on August 27th. Actor Siddiq was the general secretary of AMA when he resigned from the body, the first in a series of resignations. All right. I'm being joined at this time by Ms. Padmapriya, an actor that many of you would be very familiar with. Thank you so much, Ms. Padmapriya, for joining us. I, of course, have to ask you the question how you decode the responses from different stars that have come to the Hema Committee. But first, let me start. There are lots of people, at least 72 top voices, including actors, journalists, advocates who have written to the Chief Minister, 72 of them, and have raised concerns as a fallout of the Hema Committee report. How do you look at those concerns?
So I think just having and announcing an SIT is not sufficient, is what the letter said. And I think I completely agree with it, because a lot of them is not admissible in court of law, so it's going to fail. And so does that mean the account of those stories are unreal? Number two is what's happening is that there is a sensitization program which is required. What's happening right now is that the committee report actually acknowledges that there are 17 odd kind of offenses which are committed against, definitely against women, and sometimes even across genders. And that comes because of difference in the parity of power and structural issues in the industry. Now, of course, that tantamounts to as women, we are far more vulnerable to exploitation, and sexual exploitation becomes an important integral element of that because of the nature of all being in an unorganized sector. Having said that, since the time the report has come out, the focus seems to have just been on that. What most of the survivors are trying to say is that they're frustrated by this constant reiteration that if I want to be part of this industry, the only way of survival is to, adjust, as in the being commonly used. And the second thing is for the survivors who have out already and said, outside of the Hema Committee report and come out on media channels and said, they're like, hell go loose, I'm going to come and share my story. For them, it's been merely about first coming and sharing the story because nobody's really heard them, and it's been like a pent up thing. And they're probably not even thinking the repercussions because nobody understands that the legal repercussions of it, most of the women. So what's going to happen is now nobody is questioning whether the crime is, most people are assuming that the crime has not happened. That's the lens at which they're looking at the survivor's story. And that's deeply problematic because you're now putting the survivor on a mode of judgment. And I'm not saying that that's not fair. You'll always want to say, if the allegedly accused is actually accused or not, and all of that is fair. But I think a scenario where there is was expected lashback of this kind, especially with the Hema Committee report, it would have been nice if the government had created some kind of other support systems before just having an SIT. I think the letter also talks about some solutions like having a sensitization and awareness program amongst people on how you should look at these issues as a survivor, because there's a fair amount of trolling happening by fan clubs, and there's so the entire process of you coming out because you wanted to bhadas nikalne ke liye just came out, and now it's coming back and hitting you 10x more in the form of social ostracization, which is like a normal survivor syndrome. The second is that they've also recommended that there should be some kind of a support system which is beyond an SIT, and which is you give a set of counselors, you first equip them to believe, to understand what they have gone through, understand and give a sense of legal direction, and then say whether you really should be applying for an FIR or not. What's I think currently happening in at least a couple of accounts that I've heard is that there has been a kind of a push the SIT officials to like kind of register complaints. And even if that is coming from the state, like even if the state is the one who's filing the FIR, it still puts the onus on the survivor to come out and stand as a witness to that case. And if they're not accounting or asking for it, is that the real way of resolution is something that needs to be questioned.
Ms. Padmapriya, while solidarity for women is something that even the letter seeks for, to the critics who are looking at what's unfolding, and let's look at how the Me Too movement started earlier to what's unfolding currently in the Malayalam cinema as well. What would you say to those who may support the Me Too movement or or what's unfolding right now, or those who may not have may have a very divergent view? But what would you tell to say why come up and take names, put things out in the public domain if you don't really want to take the legal recourse and take it further? I mean, I don't want to take away the gravity of what's unfolding, but this is also a question that everybody is asking.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there are two accounts to it. I think the slight difference between the Me Too movement and I think the current scenario is that the current scenario is happening because of a very clear systemic issue of power hierarchies that exist within the industry. And that's what the Hema Committee report underscores as a reason for exploitation. And therefore, it's really not about naming X, Y, Z alone, but saying that this really steeps in from top to bottom. I think the way we need to approach these issues in public space, especially when there are systemic issues within a particular industry, which has come out from a particular report commissioned by the government, I think the empathy becomes an important factor towards the survivor. What's happening now is the like, especially if you look at the SIT, the letter focuses on SIT principally because they're also just became survivors who come out in the media in the last few days. They are people who probably don't want to come out and have mentioned their accounts in the Hema Committee. Now what's happening is, I mean, not to use a word, but for lack of anything else in my vocabulary, it almost seems like a witch hunt on the survivor, if you're short of time. But I myself had a case, I registered the first cybercrime case in Kerala. And I remember I at some point wanted to back out because I really felt bad for the parents of the guy who was like really like torturing me on really like sexually, then like on messages and on my phone. After 6 months of torture, I had filed, and then all I wanted to do was nab him and put him in the jail and put a stop to it. Not knowing very well what are my rights, what are the legal precedents, and most at 24, 25 don't know about this. Even if, like, of course, at some point, this legal awareness needs to be brought about, so you understand that. But what was important was that after I wanted to draw the complaint, the state took it up, filed an FIR, I became witness to the case. And I remember as an educated, privileged woman, when I was standing in the court stand, for 10 minutes, I actually started believing that I induced the guy to send me these sexual messages. Or I knew this guy. And that is really, like, really touching. And after, like, it took me 10 minutes in front of the judge, there was nobody, there was no camera, there was no media, nothing. And so I think it really needs to be understand that the travails of like going through a court procedure, even if it's a state-supported case, for a person to be a witness is no joke, especially if they never asked for it. They went and complained to the Hema Committee out of complete knowledge of the fact that this is going to be within 4 walls.
Ms. Padmapriya, how would you look at the responses that have emerged from the stars? From the male stars, from the women stars? I'm talking about the top stars that are loved by people, by viewers, cine lovers across the country, that are even idolized. How do you look at their responses? Rajnikant saying, I don't know about the report, Mohanlal, Mammootty to Prithvi Raj, and so many others. As an actor yourself, how do you look at these responses or the lack of them?
And they're not just actors. I think Mammootty, Mohanlal are not just actors, they're producers. Producers are responsible. Prithvi, they are all producers and much bigger. They earn a far bigger pay packet commercially and otherwise as producers more than actors, I think. So I think that distinction and that responsibility definitely as an onus, because producers do have the onus of responding to these situations far more. See, I'll just say this one thing. There are two ways of looking at it, and I'm far more comforted today that Sneha, we've spoken about this 7.5 years back. Okay, and 7.5 years back, there was a sense of distress that I used to go through, because you keep justifying and you keep justifying that change is required. For a change, I think for the first time, I'm a little calm, because somehow we don't have to justify ourselves. Suddenly, there is this way where everybody within the industry and outside the industry, including the government, knows that a change is inevitable. I myself have received a lot of messages from the industry, from my own colleagues, and even if they've not come out in the open, and it's okay, like everybody takes their time, as long as they recognize that this change is required. They recognize that what we've been trying to do is not like hunt people down or kind of break the industry, actually bring about a systemic change so that it's great for everybody to work in. Like, if you improve a system, it's not just going to help women, it's going to help men, it's going to help everybody, the entire industry, both economically and socially and culturally, and therefore kind of content we make also. And so, while I really appreciate that solidarity, I also do feel really bad that some of the key people who earn so much from this industry, in terms of equity and finance, like social equity and money, really are still in a state of denial. And that's problematic, because like, I can give you 100 solutions. We've been working on this for years, and I can come up with like 100 solutions, which could be convenient and amicable for everybody in the industry to resolve. And it's not rocket science. At the end, we all know each other. We work with each other. We figure this out. But if you're in denial that there is no issue, and this is, or you're like out of fear saying something because you have to make a statement, you kept quiet, then it's problematic.
Well, Ms. Padmapriya, thank you so much for sharing your very important perspective and giving your time. It's a long way ahead, but nonetheless, thank you so much for joining us.